Good morning. Welcome to the River Online Worship Experience. My name is Dean Ward, and I'm the lead pastor of the River, and I'm so grateful that you have decided to join in with us today. You may be wondering where we are. Well, I am too, except that I know where I am. We are across the river. Yes, we've left New Kensington and crossed the river, and we are in Tarentum, Pennsylvania. It's just across the Allegheny River from New Kensington. And I am at a place that my life changed forever on February 3rd, 2020. I am standing at the entrance of Greatness Athletics Fitness Center. And this is the gym that I was invited to for the very first time. And I came on Monday evening, February 3rd, 2020. And my life has never been the same. I want to invite you in to come and experience what the gym is like and where I am every morning, Monday through Friday at 6:30 a.m. Come on in with me now. So we are inside Greatness Athletic Fitness Center, but it's impossible to fully appreciate the story of this gym apart from its founder and owner, Gary Nagley. Gary Nagley grew up in this area and went to the Highlands School District. He was an athlete from identified as a great athlete, very young in life, and through junior high and high school, Gary was a force on the football field. But even before that, he was a force in the weight room. He still holds a school record for the most weight lifted, I think, in a squat or some press with his legs. And Gary, his role as the running back at Highlands could not be understated. He was a powerhouse running back. And he had a great career, junior high and high school, through the Highlands School District and their football team. He also played basketball and track, but he was primarily an athlete that loved football. After high school, Gary tried to find his way, and the academic life was not the best fit for Gary. And so he had always dreamed of running his own business, owning his own gym, and he began at an early age thinking about this, dreaming about this, hoping for this to become a reality. Fast forward to October 2019, Greatness Athletic Fitness Center was born, and this gym began. And I wanted to take just a moment and tell you a little bit of the story of this gym and Gary Nagley as we began, because Gary's story and the gym of this story has intersected my life in significant ways and is helping to transform me. Today, we are in the third message in our series simply called Welcome to Athens. We've been following this interaction that Paul has had with the citizens of Athens, and this story is right at a fantastic point that I want to share with you now. In Acts chapter 17, Paul is about to share the best story ever told. And today's message is just simply called Telling a Better Story. Because Paul, as we've described, went into Athens and found that these people did not even know who the Lord was. They were worshiping idols. There were some 30,000 idols made of stone and metal and clay that they worshiped. And Paul found an altar with an inscription on it that said, "To an unknown God." And Paul was invited to address the Areopagus, and he got before them And he said, I know that you're spiritual. I know that you're religious. You worship many gods. And I found this altar dedicated to the unknown God. And it is now this unknown God that I am about to tell you about. I'm about to tell you his story. And so Paul begins in Acts chapter 17 at verse 24. And Paul begins at the beginning of the story. The story starts at the beginning. And it's important to understand, oftentimes, when you hear the story of God, when you hear his story of forgiveness and redemption, oftentimes the story doesn't start till Genesis chapter 4, till Adam and Eve messed up and sinned in the Garden of Eden. However, this story begins in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. This story starts at the beginning. Paul says in verse 24, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. Now immediately Paul contrasts the God, his God, with all of their gods, because all of their gods were man-made, made of wood and stone and metal, these objects of worship. And Paul said, no. The true God, he has not been made by human hands. Paul starts at the beginning. Have you ever come into a story and the story is halfway through and you're spending all of your time trying to figure out the context, trying to figure out the beginning, trying to figure out what is happening in the story because you missed the beginning? Well, I want to help you. God's story and his interaction with humankind begins at the beginning, Genesis 1:1. And it's a great story. I want to invite you sometime to pick up your Bible and just begin reading this story. It's easy to understand. The book of Genesis is easy to follow, and it is fascinating. Well, Paul starts at the beginning of the story, but then Paul does something very interesting. Paul shows that God is a good giving God. That God is a good God and God is a giving God. And this is quite a contrast to the gods that they worshiped. Verse 25 says, and he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everyone else. In their culture, they prayed to the gods just to spare their lives. They experienced a theology where gods were always fighting and warring with each other and creating chaos, and human beings suffered as a result of all of that. And Paul says, no, you have to understand, this God, the one true God, he is a good God, and he is a giving God. Have you ever been told a story about God that just isn't true? Have you ever been told a story about how much God hates you and how God can barely stand you and how God just despises you? Well, I have to tell you, that's a bad story. That's not a true story about God. And I love the way that Paul begins with the goodness of God. That God is a giving God. That God is a caring God. That God is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. This God is a giving God, giving life and breath and everything else. The book of James tells us that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father. So I want to invite you to begin to look at some of the stories that you've been told about God and see, are they really true? Are they really honest to who God is? Or do they paint a picture of God that is out of focus and isn't accurate? I want to invite you just to pause and enjoy this video about the story of God.
I'm a writer. I've been dreaming about writing the words that could change the world since the very first time someone called me a mean name, and I understood the incredible power words have. The world was my blank page, and I was the author of my own first-person narrative. When I start writing a story, I tend to start backward, because I usually know how I want it to end. The ending is always the most important to me. So I start with my happy ending, and then I start working on the beginning. And from there, the middle of the story is built. This was how I tried to live my life as well. If I wanted to get to the end, my beginning had to start a certain way, often meaning a drastic change of some sort. And from there, I could fill in the rest. Only this doesn't work so well in real life. It wasn't before long that I began to realize that the rest of the world wasn't cooperating with the story I'd been writing for myself. If I was my own protagonist, reality was my ultimate antagonist, the arch enemy of my story. The rest of the world rarely cared about furthering my story, let alone helping me to get to my happy ending. There were plot twists I never saw coming, and often when I finally made my way to what I thought might be the end, or at least an end, it was a hollow victory. It was never the end. It was never enough. For someone writing my own story, I felt amazingly out of control of the whole thing. For 24 years, I tried to keep moving forward. I'm a firm believer that authors are driven by two motives: the desire to be loved for their creation and the desire to be known through their creation. In my reality, my creation was myself, and it was neither loved nor known. And I was ready for the story to be over. So I stopped writing the story. But something, somehow, kept it moving forward. I could only ignore the truth of it for so long. Someone else was writing my story. There was someone else writing the whole story, and I needed to know who it was. As I said, an author wants to be known through his creation. So I finally opened my eyes and started looking around me. I discovered it wasn't just me. There was so much more to take into consideration. I began to understand this author hadn't just made me, he'd authored an entire world. I started studying my author, looking back into my story, and seeing something fuller, something I hadn't seen before. I had to understand what was going on. And then a friend one day told me I could stop studying him from a distance, and I could get to personally know him instead. But why would the author of the universe want to know me? It took me a while to truly understand that just like I love every character I've ever created, every effort I've poured on the blank pages of notebook paper, and every moment I've spent lost in the fictional worlds I've created, the author of the universe loves me because he made me. So where did this leave me? Every day, I wake up in God's story, and I have a choice what role I get to play. Some days I'm the protagonist. Some days, more of a supporting character. But one thing has become increasingly clear. I'm not the main character of this story. I'm his. And this is his story.
So any given morning, Monday through Friday at 6:30 a.m., you will find me here at the Greatness Athletic Fitness Center. And what you are looking at is the visual image that has kept me out of the gym for decades. I know this is not my best look. Now, in order to help compensate for that, I've tried to color coordinate. I did not realize until I started coming to the gym that it's very important, and Gary has taught me this, that if you're wearing red tennis shoes, you wear a red shirt. If you have other color clothing on, that your clothing must match or be in the same color scheme. Well, I'm working with my tone-on-tone blue today, and this is my typical workout outfit. Now, I got my handy-dandy Under Armour water bottle and my Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat 1970s rag to wipe my brow. Usually Gary has rags here that we can use, towels here, but sometimes he doesn't, so I always have a backup one. So this is me in the morning working out. This is what I look like, and this is why I stayed away for so long. However, things are changing. Things are going well. I'm getting in shape, and I'm so grateful for that. And the reality is, the story of this gym has been in the works for years, and even though it opened officially at the end of October in 2019, the story of this gym and Gary Nagley doesn't mean anything until we join in that story. Now, the Apostle Paul, when he was talking to the Athenians in Acts chapter 17, he draws them into God's story. He shows them how even from the very beginning, they were part of God's plan. And he wanted to make sure that they were well aware that they were in this great story. And may I say that you are in this great story. Paul continues his story in verse 26. He says, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." I love the way Paul was saying to the Athenians, there's no mistake that you are here right now at the time that you are here. And the way Paul is letting us know that we are not an accident. We are not a mistake. We are not an afterthought. We are part of God's plan. This is our time, right here, right now. So often last year in 2020, I heard so many people complaining, "Oh, I hate this year. I shouldn't be I hate being here," on and on and on. And the reality is, we were created right here, right now for this time. And I wake up every day saying, this is my day. This is my time. And we are I am part of God's great story. We are in this great story. So if you're overwhelmed at just how long it's taking for things to get back to normal, if you are overwhelmed that there are so many disruptions in life right now, I want to invite you to realize that God has entrusted this time in history to you right now. He's trusted this time to me. He's entrusted this time to you because he marked out our appointed times in history. The final thing that I want to say this morning, it's just an invitation, and that is to let his story become your story. Let his story become your story. Paul in verse 27 says, God did all of this. This brief synopsis that I just gave you of the history of God, of the story of God, he did all of this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. Those last 9 words I just read are some of my favorite 9 words in all of Scripture. He is not far from any one of us. And perhaps you've been told a bad story about God, that he doesn't love you, that he's not interested in you, that you've transgressed too much, that you're too far away from him, that you're not worth his time, effort, and energy. My friend was telling me how his 15-year-old son was having a conversation with him just this week saying, I don't know how God can love me with all of the bad things that I have done. And that is a lie and a story that we've been told about God that just simply is not true. And so embrace the true story about God. Embrace this great story about God and realize that no matter how far you feel from him, that he is not far from any one of us. The verse that I tried to quote a few weeks back out in the frigid temperature that I couldn't pull out of my mind is a verse in James chapter 4. And it just simply says, if we draw near to God, he will draw near to us. Some of us are so much closer to God than we realize or could ever imagine. If you find yourself running from him, perhaps the best thing you can do is just stop running and turn toward him. Because as that verse mentioned that I just mentioned, that when we move toward him, he moves toward us and closes that gap very quickly. The fact that this gym is here, it's a boost to this community. It's a bright light. It's an encouraging place, but it doesn't mean anything to me if I don't walk in the door and join in the activity of this gym. It won't do me any good if I just look at the equipment and say, wow, that's some nice equipment. I bet that cost a lot of money. It won't do me any good if I just watch other people working out. I have to be willing to stop what I'm doing and set aside time and join in the story of this gym. And I want to invite you to join in God's story, because you're invited. And next week we're gonna look at very clearly how you can join in this great story of God. But until then, I'm going to go work out. And I'm even going to maybe even show you a few of my favorite exercises. That ought to be fun and something you may not want the children to see. So one of the exercises that we do often here is just simply on these bands called TRX. And you lean back far and use your body weight, and there's a lot of different exercises you can do. My favorite is when you bring it up to your skull and then you go into a fly. And so he'll have you do 12 to 15 of these. He likes it when you do 15 and not 12. And he really loves it the further you lay back. Because the further you lay back, the more of your own weight you're using. So this is my favorite set of exercises on the TRX. So the genius of Gary's adult group workout sessions that he hosts at 6:30 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then in the evening as well, is the 4 different places he has us do these exercises. We do 2 or 3 exercises per station, and he alternates between ones that build our strength and our muscle and ones that work on our cardio. So we have strength building and cardio together. Now, I don't know which one this is. I think it does both. It's just simply called wall ball, and we take the ball and we slam it against the wall, and then we catch the ball, and he has us do 15 each side. And if I'm frustrated with somebody, often I'll put their face right there in my mind and just slam the ball there. Okay, not really. If the Steelers are playing the Ravens, I might put the Ravens logo there. But it doesn't look like much. But you do 15 on this side and turn around and do 15 on the other, especially with the 20-pound ball, which I usually do. I have the 15-pound one just for demonstration purposes only. It will wear you out. So Gary often has us work our core, and one of my least favorite exercises he had us do about every other week is this roller. And we would have to stay on our knees and roll out and then come back in. Well, as I've shared often, I had a significant hernia when I started here in February, so it wasn't until after I got that corrected in June that I was really able to do my best at this. But still, when I would try to get out, I could get about that far, and then that's all the further I could do. And we would do 3 sets of 12, and it would just kill me. And I would watch Gary, because he would take it and he would go the whole way parallel to the ground and pull himself back up. And I'm like, I can't do that. So I finally asked Gary. I said, I'm making no progress here. This is not fun for me because I can't do this exercise. And then he said, this exercise is one of the hardest ones you'll ever be asked to do. And I thought, okay, well, at least I'm not imagining things because it's very difficult. Well, then I realized I want to get better at this. 2 weeks ago, a lady in our class, I was watching her do it, and she was laying out parallel to the ground just like Gary, and I'm like, I want to get there. So for the past 2 weeks, every day, I do a set of these at the end, and I try to go out further and further each time. And that's about as far as I can do. So I'll do 12 of these. So I'm getting a little closer, but I'm not there yet. And just to remind myself how far I had to go, I'll try to take it all the way out, and that's always fun. I still have a ways to go. Those are a few of the exercises I do here. And again, because of everything that I'm experiencing here, getting my body into shape for the first time in my adult life, this place is changing my life. Thank you, Gary.